Oh, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
Good, thank you.
So nice to meet you.
I'm
Heard
trying
so
to
much
get you.
about you over the years.
Oh, thanks.
Great. Oh, good. So here we are. We're talking about our climate and our planetary. I like to use the word planetary crisis because that's what it truly is. And so, anyway, I guess we were talking with. Oh, go ahead and introduce yourself and who you are and your background, and then I guess the first question was, what do you feel is likely to be the climate crises that the city of San Jose or the Bay Area, city of San Jose, well, we'll talk about the city of San Jose because that's what we're talking about is how to get intense climate action into the charter of the city of San Jose. And so the San Jose, what climate crises are likely in the city of San Jose, and that's the first question. And then the second one being, what do you think the city of San Jose, as our government, should do to get in front of these crises, as well as to protect the people from harm?
Mm, yeah. So, good morning. I'm Gladwyn D'Souza. I'm the chair of the Conservation Committee at the Loma Prieta chapter of the Sierra Club. And thank you for interviewing me on this topic that's near and dear to my heart. And it's a really good time also to be talking about it. We are in a climate crisis, as the UN has said, and their report from the IPCC is titled Code Red for Humanity. This is a time when we need to be stepping up and working on solutions to problems that are impacting us on a regular basis. The three or maybe 4 or 5 problems that are big for San Jose would be, the first one is extreme heat. This, if you remember August of last year, we had, temperatures get up over 100 degrees. The power goes out. We are unable to stay cool. And the reason the power goes out is because we have these large industrial users in the South Bay, like data farms, and they also have problems when the heat rises. They have to run more generators to keep the big data farms cool, and then that causes a drop in voltage, which brings the lines down, and everybody's lights go out. So extreme heat is one big problem. The second big problem is what's been happening over the last 20 years. The winds have been getting bigger. And with the winds, when you have a fire, in the past, the fire would be a small fire, but now the winds carry it over large distances. And we saw that last year with the CZ1 complex, the big fire in the South Bay. The third problem is something that's generational in San Jose. I remember, cycling home one day, and I was going through on Santa Clara, and you stop there on the bridge because there's a mattress in the tree and over the Guadalupe. And where did the mattress come from? It came from the flooding. The Guadalupe rises, and the homeless mattress floats down and then ends up embedded in the tree. It's a kind of disquieting sight, as you wonder about what happens. I also remember in Alviso, where we used to have regular flooding. And you remember a couple of years ago, we had major flooding on Coyote, off the Coyote Creek, in the area close to downtown. So these are regular events. They're caused by the changing precipitation patterns, so they're likely to get worse. And there's another one that we need to deal with. Finally, the really big problem for greenhouse gases is traffic congestion. And, it's kind of unrelated. It's related to the question, but unrelated to global warming. But we live in an earthquake zone. And I remember, when in '89, I was in the downtown library. And when the earthquake struck, the Loma Prieta quake, and the librarian who was on the floor I was on yelled, get under the tables. And so I got under the table, and that really shook. It shook like for 30 seconds. And when it was done, books had fallen off the shelves and everything. They had to close the library to put it all together. And I get out there on my bicycle and I'm headed home. I used to live on Kirtner, and all the traffic was stopped. It was actually safe and good to be out on your bike because you didn't have to worry about, because the lights were out, and so the traffic was all stopped. So the traffic wasn't dangerous anymore. But on a regular basis, that traffic is dangerous, and it's causing this climate change. So that's like the fourth big problem. That answers your first question, right? What are the problems facing us today?
Right. Yeah.
Wildfires, floods.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Right. And I was just thinking about what's happening today. They were saying that the big storm that's coming in, and how it's, well, the north, they're talking about maybe the North Bay, but it could be here as well. So, the amount of rain that's coming, and then we had the fires in the, further north, and the what is that called? The mud that comes down. That's what do they call that? What is that called? What are the mudslides? Right, the mudslides,
yeah.
Right, and that are in that could be coming like tomorrow morning, starting tomorrow. This morning, I guess. What is it? Sunday morning. Yeah. So those things, the mudslides and things like that. But it's from the flooding. Flooding, could happen. Right, and that's what you said. Yeah. And then we were. Well, thank you for that, because you really covered so many of the issues. So let's review it. Let's say what you said. You said the first was
extreme heat.
Extreme heat. Yes, right.
Yeah.
Definitely. We see that, and and we don't have. Well, we'll talk about this, but I've seen where no communities, the lack of community centers where we could get relief, things like that, as we go into our second part of our question. But
it's a nationwide phenomenon.
Definitely. What we say?
And it's a nationwide phenomena.
Right.
And the National Wildlife Service, the National Weather Service, does not classify it as a weather event, but they're just beginning to. And the Bay Area Air Quality Management is also looking at figuring out how to classify it and rate it, so that because those are also days when you end up having air quality problem days, and so
with the heat,
they need to spare the air alert. So
that the air quality degrades. Right. So we have you said the first one was heat, and then you said the second was
wildfires.
Right. And then bringing that pollution that they say is the worst pollution because of burning of everything in our homes and our buildings, the plastics, and so it gets so much. I mean, what was it? There were places up in Tahoe. There was like 500, parts per million. We're supposed to be zero, in terms of our particulate, with the AQI, right? And how bad you've seen it get, right? And so you're saying the wildfires, and then even though we don't have, we do pretty much, Santa Cruz Mountains, but all the air is shared amongst us all, and how we get that bad air down here, right? So it's the wildfires and the pollutants that come from that and destroying our air quality. What were we gonna say, Gladwyn?
No, that's right.
Right. So we were repeating. We were just reviewing. You said. First was heat, then second was fires, and both of them creating lots of air pollution that degrade our health. And then the third was flooding. Flooding, right. And we've had it here, and it's coming possibly tomorrow morning, this, Sunday morning, with so much rain coming, and record breaking after our droughts. and that was the third, was the flooding, and then the fourth you said was cars, and the way is that,
Congestion,
yes, what were you saying, traffic
congestion, yeah, traffic congestion.
congestion, right, and
Yeah,
how that will impact, how when everything, well, like earthquake could trigger that, and any other emergencies could trigger
hmm,
the increase in traffic, is what you're saying.
yeah.
Right. Okay, good. Thank you. And what I was just wondering, okay, so I was just thinking about, besides earthquake, what other things? Well, we see the
Congestion
traffic
and
already. So
yeah,
we're just saying we're not, traffic is, because we're so built on the car that, and our, infrastructure is so fragile in that sense, that you
yeah,
saying, even now, so right now we're experiencing the degrading of that, because we haven't
right,
changed the way we're living. Okay, that's
right.
good.
So
Okay,
and
good.
then,
So
so
then
in
this,
terms of solutions,
right.
for
Thank you.
the heat, the the New York Times had an article about the one thing that does solve the heat problem is trees. You need
Right,
trees reduce the temperature 10 to 15 degrees, and you want to have the lived area of the city covered in trees. But the LA Times had an article that said low-income communities were the ones where you don't have any trees. So
right,
fortunately, in San Jose, the city is working on a tree ordinance,
right,
and this is the time to be submitting comments in there. And one thing that the tree ordinance should take into account is the lost carbon when a tree is removed. You want to account for that now. Now that we're in a climate emergency, and then you want to
well,
build this
explain
new.
what you mean by that. The lost carbon, that when the tree die. Wait, what are you saying about the tree in terms of the
When a
lost carbon?
tree So currently when a tree is cut, the person who takes the tree out only needs to replace it with three 15-gallon saplings.
Right,
But those 15-gallon saplings are not going to have the carbon content of that tree for another 30
right,
years.
right. Oh, 3 years, they're
And
saying, yeah,
yeah, and
right,
so we need to account for that lost carbon. If somebody's going to take a tree out, it needs to be counted as within the city's budget and replaced,
right.
however they're going to replace it.
Right, that
But
every time we take a tree out, then we are losing the ability, right, for it to capture the carbon, right, the
yeah,
carbon
that
dioxide that it takes
that was
in.
captured,
And then
right?
what was that?
And these trees, like for example, an oak tree lives 900 years,
Right. Oh,
and
900,
we are
900 years
taking,
an oak tree can live. Is that true? I didn't
yeah,
know that. That I know, like the valley oaks that I planted in front of my house could live 900 years.
yeah, you can
Wow.
imagine how many generations will still be able to have the cooling benefits of that tree, right?
Right. And that what you're saying, that when we take our trees down, we're not asking for enough replacement factor, is what you're saying.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. We should be, if somebody takes a tree out, they should be preserving a tree on the edge of the city where, those lots should be retired and turned into part of a park system. And that way, you want to prevent this, because currently what's happening is the city is spreading out into the wildlands, which is where
Right.
the fires are happening. They're essentially inviting the fire in by spreading the houses in those areas. It's
Right.
essentially the fires following the expanding road, and so
Right. So are you
we want to
saying that we should have a
retire.
lot more trees replacement factor? Is that's the main
Yeah.
issue? And you said three. Is that sufficient? Is that what you're saying?
No, the city requires three 15-gallon saplings. I'm saying
Okay,
that's
right.
totally inefficient,
Totally inefficient. Right. Not
right,
enough. Okay, that
not
that's
enough.
it's the
So
replacement has to be a lot more than
yeah,
three, like, yeah, many more times that,
yeah,
because we lose so much when we lose a tree
yeah,
of
and we
carbon
lose
capture.
that 900-year safety net that the oak would have provided to
Right.
probably 45 generations.
And then it
That's
takes,
a
like you're
big
saying,
deal.
at least 3 years to capture those three, to grow for 3 years before it can capture what the original tree was, the work the original
Yeah,
tree was
right. It
doing.
takes about 30 years for it to
30, oh,
grow.
30,
30,
30,
yeah. Yeah,
not
it takes
3, 30.
30 years, right.
So those
And
three little saplings, even three of them to replace one tree, it
yeah,
takes combined, it would take 30 years for those three to do the work of that one major tree that we cut down.
in 2020, right? So that in 2050, when the temperatures are a lot higher,
30
all we are doing is,
years it takes
yeah,
to replace that before it does the
right,
work of that one tree.
yeah.
Wow, 30.
And then
That's
another
amazing.
thing about trees, like for example, an oak tree supports about 600 species of moths,
Right,
which
right,
those caterpillars have adapted to live
right,
off that tree, and that's what the birds eat. So when you lose the tree, you're also losing. You're essentially affecting the web of life.
right, 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 right. And we're not recreating that
We're not
as
really
urgently as we need to when we do our replacement
right.
our replacement protocols are not sufficient to, in terms of the biodiversity, issues of bringing that back, as
Yeah,
quickly as we, removed it. Right.
right.
Thank you. Yeah.
Trying to get away from the sun, and it keeps moving with me.
So
Okay.
that
Uh,
was dealing with our, well, that was dealing, was that the heat? And was
that
that
was
what you were
the
talking
heat.
about? And so
Yeah,
you would, what was that?
we need to work on that ordinance that San Jose is
The
working
tree
on,
canopy. Yes,
the
the
tree
tree issue.
ordinance.
And
And
also
then
the
Councilwoman
what was that?
Councilwoman
Right.
Carrasco on the east side wants
Yes.
to plant 30,000 trees there.
Just
So
on the east
that's
side.
another project to work on.
Right, right. On the east side where it's the tree canopy is lacking for sure.
Yeah,
And but I was thinking in terms of heat, you were recommending the trees as a mitigation for
yeah.
heat. Right. Okay, that's really important. Right.
And then there are two sort of within when you're talking about where we are going. The Chinese have a saying, right? It's the same symbol that they use for crisis is also can be read as opportunity.
Right, right.
So
Beautiful.
the opportunity here is to redesign the human habitation so that we are safe. So the key word here in future planning is resilience. How can
Mhm.
we be more resilient?
Right, right,
And two things come up. So one is what we can do, and the other one is how can we do it so that it's efficient and doesn't cost a lot of money, and maybe you want to do it within what you're spending currently. You don't want to have to figure out where the money is going to come from. In
okay.
other words, instead of putting the money towards burning the place down, we need to figure out how to use the money to build
Right.
it up. So two things you can do is one is microgrids. So
Mm.
these are where like you have solar and then a battery, and then at night you run the house off the battery.
Right.
So that that as the problems come up with the grid going down because of extreme heat, you can still keep the lights on, and especially for communities that are health impacted, they need a ventilator or something, a
Right.
big deal last year. You want to be able to keep the power on for them, right? So those are microgrids, and we can think about microgrids in uh, for energy, but we can also think about them for water, and we can also think about them for waste. You want to be able to put these microgrids together, and the reason is, when you look at what happened with the pandemic, our supply chains were cut off. Where were the masks? Where were the PPE? You want to be able to be more self-sufficient as a community. So you want to think of microgrids in a larger, bigger scale. And then on the efficiency side, you want to look at, for example, light pollution. You want to be able to develop these communities together so that we take advantage of sunlight during the daytime, and then at night we use our microgrid to relight the spaces. But then you don't want to relight it and waste a ton of light. And San Jose used to be a leader in this because of the observatory.
Right.
When you look at the lights in the city, there used to be these low sodium lights, right?
Right.
And you want to be able, and the reason, and then those low sodium lights also make it so that the bats and insects and all are not attracted to them and then crash
Okay.
and die
Right.
in those places, right?
Right.
So it has a whole larger effect. And then it turns out that light, and National Geographic had a really big series on this about light being a pollutant
Right.
that impacts human health too. And so you want to have lower intensity
Does
lights.
San Jose still have that issue
No,
with
they've been replacing them, but because PG&E's been giving them a good deal to replace the lights and put in these new LED lights.
but
But
they're
some of these
brighter.
LED lights, they're brighter, yeah.
They're
And the
whiter
problem,
light. Yeah.
whiter light all the
And what was
time.
that
And
type of light that's good? Is the they call it what did they call that?
those used to be sodium lights, but today
This
you can get low Kelvin LED lights, and that's what we should be using. And
is
then we
the
should
warmer LEDs, the warmer.
the colder ones is what we
What
should
did
be
you call? I'm sorry,
using.
what?
The colder ones is what we should be using.
Oh, the colder
Yeah, less
that are
than
more white, that are not as yellow, or
that are more yellow. Yeah,
oh, more yellow. But isn't that
yeah.
called warmer? Isn't that a
Yes, that's right. That's
warm?
warmer.
Well, let's just see. Well, I guess, but it's actually a lower temperature of Kelvin, right? So
Yeah,
you want it to go lower in the sense of the Kelvin, right?
right. Yeah,
Right,
you
even
want to
though
be
it's
under
less white.
2500, even
It,
as low as 1700. Yeah,
1700, right? The warmer
yeah,
lights, or yeah, right, the
right,
warmer. And we're
right.
not doing that in San Jose because we
We're
got a good
not.
deal.
Yeah, right. That, and also people did not take it into account. They didn't see this sort of insect apocalypse coming along, right? Where all the insects are attracted to lights and then they end up dying in those places.
And so right now we're not even addressing that issue as right
Yeah,
now, that we
yeah,
transitioned away from those, away from the warmer lights, whatever that was, and then
hmm,
that for the sky viewing that we originally initiated it, and then PG&E offered us some lights, and then but they were high Kelvin, which was a whiter light and we took it
right.
because it was a good deal, and
Yeah,
we didn't consider the warmness that we needed to avoid the insect apocalypse, and as well as what
impacts
other
to
the
human health.
viewing of the sky. We
Yeah,
don't care about that anymore
and
either.
right, and what
But really,
National
the insect being the
Geographic
biggest issue. What?
and National Geography says it impacts human health too.
Oh, the brightness of that white
Yeah,
light is
right,
not as healthy for us as a warmer light. I know, I love the
right.
warm lights on our property. Yes.
And then
And
most people also are, humans have evolved to see in the night. We have night vision,
mhm,
and essentially what the lights do is it closes our pupil, right? It's so bright,
mhm.
and so we end up not seeing. And so then we think we
Oh,
need more
we're not
light,
using our true
and
night vision. Yeah.
yeah,
Uh,
right. And we should really be using our true night vision. And then people who can't see at night should get glasses, night vision glasses,
oh, really?
right?
Yeah.
That would be the ideal solution where
But what's
you
happened is
stay
that we've
dark at night and then
transitioned. What
you
was that? I'm sorry, the plane just went.
the
What was
ideal
that?
solution would be where you stay dark at night and you used your regular night vision and then
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
because there's enough light out there with the moonlight and everything
Right.
to see.
Right. And my
So, and
husband,
then
yeah,
and then you could use vision triggered low Kelvin lights,
right. The low
whereas
Kelvin.
as
Right.
motion triggered. So as you walk into those areas,
Okay, only motion triggered to get a
yeah,
brighter light. We should only have the
right,
motion triggered for brighter light, not to keep our lights on all night.
right.
Right. Yeah.
And this would save a lot of energy. So you don't have
Right.
to, you could be powered up on the microgrid and you're
Right.
not using a lot of energy.
Yeah. And right. And I was thinking, because we started, so that's a real issue that the city needs to work on, is to transition this, to get back to the warmer lights. That's another
Yeah,
thing we have to put on our things to do list, because we've really we're not doing that here in San Jose, huh? We're not as good as we should be with that warmer lights. And that would be our street lights, all of our street lights basically is what we'd have to transition to, a warmer light. And
yeah.
do you see that in other cities, that they've done better than San Jose right now, or?
Yeah, there are some cities, especially like Tucson, Arizona, that have done better. Yeah.
Okay. And
There's about 30 states that have light pollution bills on that they passed.
I see. So we had it originally, but we just went for a cheaper solution at, when we were in economic hard times, and we overrode our concerns about,
Yeah,
seeing the night sky, and then not realizing the externality of what happened with our insects. We didn't
right.
realize that. We saved money, but we didn't understand what was
Hmm.
at risk there. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So
that's
that
something we have to put
covers
on our list, huh?
heat. What we can do to
And the only
to
thing I want to talk about, because my husband is a biologist too, scientist, he talks about the microgrid, and he says that that's what we do need, because we're off grid solar at our home right now. So
Mhm.
we have battery backup, but we like, as we go into the winter, my husband talks about switching back to PG&E, and I want to be off PG&E completely, because of don't want to support the transmission lines, because the
Mhm.
transmission lines have been causing the fires. And
Right.
so, I don't want to be supporting that at all. And so he talks about a microgrid too, where we'd have battery backup,
Mhm.
available by our city, provided by our city in their clean energy program. Um, and I know that is that what it would be? Just a battery bank? Is that how you see it? That we could, have as
Mhm.
our backup, for our off-grid solar on our home, on our rooftops. Is that how you see it?
Yeah, so there's like a two-part question there. So one is what you currently have would be called a nano grid. It's so small,
Right,
it's down to
right,
the home scale.
right.
And then the microgrid would probably be on a neighborhood level, so that and there's one being built here in San Mateo by the Congregational Church, where the
Uh-huh.
whole block will be a microgrid. And so you want this sort of neighborhood level microgrid that then provides the various circuits that will support it. So the second part of the question is, currently we on a at the state level, we only control the supply of electricity, and we need to support control the demand also. And
Mm.
so there are, in the LA area, there are new companies now that are called distributed service operators
So
and
distributed what?
service operators.
Service. Uh-huh.
And what they do is they take various neighborhood level microgrids, and they take that and aggregate the power, and then they're able to put that on the market as a. So if you have extra power stored up in your batteries, then they will sell it for you on
The
the
grid.
market, to the grid
I
when
see.
there are wherever there is demand for that power. Currently, that power is sent through these centralized transmission lines, and what you want to have is this distributed network that will be able to distribute it more locally. Uh,
And so you'd have like these battery powered, like, networks, like, all this, like,
yeah, it could be
whatever
battery, but
what was that?
it could be a whole bunch of things. It could be battery, it could be geothermal,
Oh,
which is like, so, and then heat pumps. Geothermal is a sort of a heat pump that works off the earth
right,
and warms your water and things like that, and you can control that temperature. And the distributed service operator could be controlling that, so that you heat more water up when you don't need it, and then you use it when you, so that you're not heating water up when the grid is impacted.
right. So you'd
So
have
so
these
there are a whole bunch of things out
So
there
you'd
that.
have these banks of batteries in, like in San Mateo, they're having a model of it. Maybe I could look into it. But
Mhm.
they're having like banks of batteries that are being charged, but just from solar panels that they have, that
Yeah,
are community solar panels that are
during the
charging these.
daytime when you don't need the power, that's what you're doing. You charge your solar banks, right?
Right. And so then that is a community bank that they can use, the individual nano
Yeah,
grid users that we need a lot more of,
right,
could be using that as their backup, this
right.
community battery. And that's what's happening in San Mateo. They bought one,
Yeah.
or they're working on
And
one.
then most houses use 2 to 5 kilowatts of power. And these batteries, the batteries that you like a Tesla wall are about 10 kilowatts, so they have about 2 days of supply in them.
Mm-hmm.
And but your car, the average, even the Nissan Leaf has 40 kilowatt batteries.
Mm-hmm.
They could power a house for 3 or 4 days
Mm.
and still have power to drive around. And
So
and
this
and
church was this church is it bought it? Is that what happened? It was a private church that in San
it's a private
Mateo
church, yeah,
that
yeah,
invested their community their community dollars
money,
to create this neighborhood for the community, this grid that they
yeah,
provided for their neighborhood.
right,
That's great.
yeah.
Okay,
So
good. So
that
that was that one with
heat,
electricity was the
yeah,
heat
that
again with
was
the heat.
heat and a big, the sort of the longer solution. Plant
Right.
trees and build microgrids.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. So the next one was wildfires and what we can do about that. And there's two things. One which no politician is talking about, but you don't want to. It's called intrusion. This is where you start building homes in areas that can burn.
Right.
So you want to stop that intrusion, and the politicians aren't talking about that because the real estate agents don't want that to happen,
Right.
and they really need to talk about it because the costs are so high. So for example, when Paradise burned, the
Right.
insurance company in that area went broke.
Oh, went
And
broke?
because yeah,
Yeah.
they were capitalized for about $20 million, and they had $60 billion in damages, so they went broke. And the state, you and I picked up the tab, right? And this year the community of Gurneyville burnt down.
Which community?
And Gurneyville,
Gurneyville. Yeah.
yeah. So that tab is going to be picked up by you and me too. And at some point, the state's has to say that we are not going to be building, we are not going to be intruding into the wildlands anymore.
Right. Right.
So that's
Yeah.
one big
I
solution.
wonder in
And
San
then
Jose, I mean, even like, when we look at Santa Cruz, I guess I'll just put this down. Santa Cruz, we've had fires there and, and yet, and like in Paradise and Guerneville and all, we've been saying, that we shouldn't be building, we shouldn't be living up there.
you're
So,
right.
or at least not expand, but then we pay for it, and that's why we're building back in Santa Cruz
Yeah,
Mountains, and paying
right.
for them to rebuild. So your suggestion is that we don't, is what you're saying. We don't
So
support
one
that.
is you want to stop the intrusion. and
Right.
and
Right.
that involves both not doing any new intrusion as well as pulling people out that have intruded into these areas. So in the 90s, because the EPA was formed to essentially to clean up the water, and they provided money in the 70s and 80s and 90s for cities to build these sewer treatment plants so that
Mm.
the sewer wasn't going into the water and then contaminating the water. And in the 90s, New York was supposed to build a sewer treatment plant and a water treatment plant so that the contaminated water didn't come into the cities. And instead, what New York did was they went out and used eminent domain to remove people that were living in their watersheds,
Mm.
so that the Croton, Delaware, and I think the Hudson, the three watersheds that supply New York, were then essentially cleaned up by taking out the septic tanks of people that were living there.
Mm. Mhm.
And now New York gets all its drinking water from these watersheds. It's like the only city in the world that has a 1,000-year solution to their drinking water, right? Most other cities have these treatment plants, and then they have to treat their water and then bring it into the city.
Mhm.
And every 30 years you have to go out and rebuild the treatment plant.
Uh-huh. And
And
so what
that's
they
billions
did,
of dollars.
right, so by removing people that were causing the polluting of the water in New York,
Yeah.
that solved a lot, like by eminent domain, removing the pollutants. And in corollary here, we're saying, I mean, I'd like to know more about that issue, but
Yeah.
just to get to where we are, we're talking about the fire. We do need to, through eminent domain, repopulate, remove these people from these what is it, the wildlife wildlife, urban, the two living in the wildlife, living in the wild, in like the
Yeah.
piney woods, like,
Right.
that people are wanting to live in. We need to use our capital to bring them in as climate refugees into the
Right.
urban core. I mean, that's
Right.
that's basically what you're saying, is that we need to
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
rethink living in the
So,
piney
so
woods
the
in
the New York solution was eminent domain for water, but there are other solutions on the East Coast. FEMA has said they're not going to be repaying once a community has flooded, and so the
Oh,
property
they said
values
that
have
in New York,
dropped.
or
Yeah,
where, or in general?
they've said it in New York after Hurricane Sandy,
Okay.
and in the Carolinas where
Or
they've been
just FEMA
flooding.
saying they're not going to rebuild for any
Yeah,
flooding? That's
on
one
the
of their,
second time, the first time they'll pay you, but the
a
second
second
time
time, then we're done.
you're done. Yeah, and so now what the cities are doing is it's essentially a form of transfer of development rights, where they're buying out these properties, and then the
Mm,
people can use that money to move into the more urbanized core.
right. And that's what you're saying with our wildlife
Yeah,
interface issues, and our fire issues. And then the corollary is that preparing for more climate refugees to come into our urban. That's another issue
yeah,
of
that's
San
another issue.
Jose,
Yeah,
of bringing more of these climate refugees into our
right.
city. So that's
And
also,
then in those
another
areas,
problem that we're going to be facing is climate refugees.
yeah. And then in those problems where we take people out, we should be looking at reintroducing beavers. And the reason is, beavers used to be on the continent, and they paid for the Western migration. Their pelts, were taken sold as hats in Europe.
Mm,
And as people came west, they would kill the beavers. And the
mm,
last beaver in Santa Clara County was killed on the Guadalupe in 1857.
mm, mm.
And every now and then the beavers do come back. You see them sometimes on there were a couple on the Guadalupe a few years ago.
But are they still there?
No, they're not.
Oh.
But they need to be reintroduced, especially in these areas in the wildfire zones, because they essentially create surface water and they rehydrate the
Mm,
landscape so that it doesn't
mm,
burn. And this
mm,
is happening in Oregon, and NPR had a whole big story on it last week.
mm. The reintroducing of the beaver.
We're reintroducing of the beaver in Oregon and Colorado, and
That's great.
how when the wildfires come through, the
Mm,
areas where the beavers are do not burn. And you
right.
can
Because
even
there's
see
more.
like elk and other animals come down from the
Oh,
hillside and they shelter in the beaver
right.
ponds
Right. Because
during the wildfire.
right, because the beaver creates these areas where it takes the wood and drops it down and creates wet zones of little lakes type of issue, and
Right, right.
creates more moisture in the environment.
Rehydrates, right? Rehydrate,
Rehydrates.
and
Yeah,
then
that's
those
beautiful.
trees and all don't burn in there. And yeah,
Can we
so we
do
should
that? Is
be.
there still a lot of beavers available to relocate?
Yeah, they are. They've been extremely resilient, and whole communities in Scotland and
Oh, great.
Siberia and
Right,
no, Serbia
right,
and Canada, and then
right.
Oregon, Colorado. They're using beavers
That's
to.
great. Because we were so
Uh,
happy when we had a couple of them that we found in the Guadalupe. But what you're saying is we need to, put out a request for proposal for all of them to come. Put it out there.
So,
Right.
well, there are people that will capture them in areas where the landowners are complaining, and then they'll relocate them for you. And there is
You mean
also there's a whole within the biological community. There's a group that will build one of these called beaver analog dams, so that essentially the beaver dam is will close off a lot of the flow, and then that causes the stream to bed to expand. And sometimes there are houses there and they don't want the stream to expand, so then these guys they build a little gap in the dam so that the water can keep going through and the stream doesn't expand on that side.
right. Oh, that's a
And those are the
beautiful
kinds
thing.
of new jobs we need in the economy.
Oh, what for capturing the beavers and
No, no, yeah, for
what?
one, for capturing, but also to build these beaver analog dams. We need to be taking
Beaver
natural
analog
solutions.
dams. That it's a human participation in building. Oh, we have
Yeah,
to
right.
assist them. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, in certain circumstances, we assist them, right?
Oh,
So that you don't want to, if there's infrastructure on one side, you don't want that infrastructure
I see.
foundation to get
Oh,
eroded, right?
right. So it
So
has to
you
be
would,
monitored. It's a human animal interface to make it
yeah,
really work the way we need
right,
it because we have such demands that we have to, it is a job
right,
that we have to work on to
right,
make it work right.
yeah.
Okay,
And
that's
there
a
are
great
really good
job. I love that.
examples.
That's a fossil fuel free job, right?
Exactly. Right.
Yeah,
Instead of all these other jobs that cause a problem, these are
right,
jobs that would cause
right. Oh,
solutions.
that sounds so beautiful. Yeah. Okay, good.
So that's wildfires, and again, you're looking at resilience there.
Right,
How can the community become more
right,
resilient?
right,
And then the third thing we talked about was the flooding from the creeks, and there uh, Sierra Club last week sued San Jose, right?
oh, you
Because
filed the
of
paperwork? You did it?
yeah,
Oh, I'm so
yeah,
proud of
right.
you. Good.
So that was so basically on the creeks, you want to preserve the setbacks,
Right,
the existing setback. But I think the creeks need to be expanded. Their floodplain needs to be expanded.
right.
Essentially, the creek needs to be looked at as a living organism
Mhm.
and that has a need, and its banks are going to move in and out, right? And
Right,
so the same process that we're using for wildfire to take people out of the very high fire safety zones.
right.
We should also be using that on the creeks to create the
Okay,
floodplain that can
right,
accommodate the
right,
increasing precipitation patterns from climate change. So
right,
we used to have a certain amount of rainfall,
right.
and now we have longer dry periods and wetter wet periods.
Hmm.
And it's really the wetter wet periods that you need to accommodate on the creek banks.
Right,
And we need to be thinking about those creek banks as wildlife corridors.
right. Wildlife corridors, right.
Like
And actually, yeah, go ahead.
like here on the in San Mateo Creek, 2 years ago there was a mountain lion downtown that came all the way down the creek to because it was a lot drier 2 years ago, right? So the mountain lion was probably following the deer into the city
Is
itself,
that Palo Alto? In Palo Alto?
and it was here in San Mateo on El
San
Camino.
Okay,
They found the mountain lion.
right.
But if the creek was a corridor, then the mountain lion would have a corridor to move from Skyline uh, the um, the bay, which
Mm,
is its traditional uh, predatory ground, and then it can go down the other side, which is Crystal Springs, back
mm.
down to the ocean, right?
Right,
Instead
so
of
in San
then
Jose, if
it's
we expanded our river banks, right, is what you're saying,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Then people would be concerned that mountain lions would come down, but right, or something, is that what? But
They do,
how
but they
we
do
address
now.
that is it's more of a corridor that would allow
Yeah,
them to get back into the nature of the river. How would you
right.
explain that?
Yeah,
That
it's a wildlife corridor that allows them to move. Right now, what happens is they show up on the street, and then that's when they become a problem. But
right.
if the corridor was intact, they would
Could
stay
we do
within the
that in San
corridor.
Jose? Is that like if let's say
Yeah,
there we are at that area by the Guadalupe downtown, would there be a way? Oh, right, we could get them to go all the way down the Guadalupe, all the way to Alviso type of, to have a
yeah,
much
right.
more of a
Yeah,
corridor of the whole river.
and over here in San Mateo, it's mountain lions, but in San Jose, it may be something else. It may be elk
Right.
that
Okay.
are in Coyote Valley, and they could be moving along the
But you're
Coyote
saying we
Creek.
could create that river corridor all the way through the Guadalupe River to really
Yeah.
expand that riverbed. Like right now we have our
Hmm.
bike trail right there along the
Yeah.
Guadalupe. But would you say that it needs to be expanded out more? I guess it's still
Yeah.
underneath. Right. Well,
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to even have the bike trail over there. The bike trail, I mean, the road on the side of the river should be the bike trail, right? The
the
cars
road on
that
the
are
side of the where?
causing
The
the
railroad.
road on the side of the river should be the bike trail. Like
Okay.
87 should be the bike trail, right?
Right. Or even
87 should
over by
not
the
be making
railroad.
the pollution. Yeah, right.
Right. What pollution did you say?
87 is creating the greenhouse gases,
Right.
which is resulting in these problems we are discussing, right?
Right. So what you're
So
saying
one way
though
to
is that, but we would put our bike trail maybe next to that 87 is what you're saying?
you would change 87 so that one lane would be a dedicated electric bus lane,
Right.
and the next lane would be a dedicated electric bicycle lane,
Right.
and
Only
you would have,
electrical, right. And they've been talking about
yeah,
actually getting rid of 87. Did you hear that in their proposals?
that's a
The,
great idea. They've been
for
doing that in San
for the
Francisco.
Google
Yeah,
Village, that was one of their proposals. You like that idea to get rid of
yes,
87?
yeah, yeah. We
And
should be pulling this freeways out of the city.
we need to pull them
87,
out.
280, 237. Yeah,
Oh,
I remember
280 and
when
237, get rid of them all. I like that.
I remember when in the 18 in the 1970s and 80s, I would ride my bike down the it used to be called Mountain View Alviso Road, and you could buy watermelons and all kinds of stuff on that road, right? There would be fruit stands out there, and there were a lot of burrowing owls all over the place.
Wait, there's a plane again. Wait, say it again.
There used to be burrowing owls out there,
Burrowing owls. Yes, right. Over there was,
and
I think we tried to save them at Mission College. I don't think we won that one, right? Did we lose
right.
that?
And another time I remember having to, there was a yellow snake about this big in width that was crossing the road, and I had to jump my bike over it.
Did we lose that battle with those burrowing owls at Mission at the
Oh yeah,
Mission College?
they're almost
What?
extinct in this. They're almost extinct in the
Remember,
South
we
Bay.
would try to save those at Mission College.
Yeah,
You didn't. It didn't work,
yeah.
huh?
It used to be all over. There used to be, if you went down the Guadalupe, you would see burrowing owls all over the place, and different kinds of snakes and all that. They're
And
all
they're
gone.
almost extinct now. The burrowing
Yeah,
owls.
yeah.
Right.
In the South Bay,
Right.
if you go up to Sacramento and places like that, you'll see them
Right.
still, but
Okay.
not,
But in
but
the
down here
South
you don't see
Bay,
them
yeah.
anymore.
Mm.
So the flooding, we need to take the similar solution that we are doing for the wildfires, and the overall solution is called managed retreat. So we need to build managed retreat into the general plan that's currently being updated.
Managed retreat away from the wild, the what is it called? The wildlife urban, that urban interface.
Interface. Yeah.
Is it wildlife? We're urban, yeah.
No, wildfire.
Wildfire urban. Oh, okay, wildfire urban. Yeah. So so we have to expand that to, well, we need to get people out of the wildfire areas, basically, is what we're having to do. That's what we have to do. And we could, even you're suggesting eminent domain that we, and FEMA monies to, say, we're not going to rebuild after the second fire, and we've already had that in Santa Cruz Mountains. So we really need to move all those people down.
Yeah. And transfer of development rights. Yeah. And then beavers.
And beavers. Okay. Right. That, and then beavers. And then was there something else that we said with the flooding? You were talking about, what was the answers for the flooding? It was
expanding
creating larger flood zones, riparian corridors. And would we have to move the Guadalupe Trail? Because it seems like it's underneath, but there,
it should be moved too. It should be.
It should be moved, the Guadalupe Trail, and it should be expanded into a wildlife corridor that any places where the trail is at the level of the river, right?
And the road that's on their side should be converted into the trail.
The road that's on the side, into a trail. Oh, is that, what road is that?
Whatever roads are out there that are running parallel to the
trail. Okay, take the road, but expand the wildlife corridor there and keep, and that's where, what you're fighting with that Boston development by the Waz Way, you're saying that we need to expand that, and that's just the beginning of it.
That's just so Waz Way, we're saying that the 30-foot setback that's in the habitat conservation plan should be the one that the city meets. That's what the city said they were going to do, and that's what they should commit to.
And it was 30-foot setback.
Yeah,
which was a adjustment from the 100 was the original,
right? Right, and 100 is better, and maybe even 1,000 is what we need for the
Right. And they're
changing
going to
statistics
zero
today.
foot back. Is that development was
That's
zero?
right. They're going to zero, and so you are going to end up with what you saw in Germany this year, right, where really wealthy communities were wiped out by the floods, and the cars went floating by.
Right. And when they were talking about it at the city council meeting, they were not ever talking about the flooding. It was like, oh, something to do with like 10, it was like a 10-year flood but it was like,
Yeah,
we're not having 10-year floods. We're having 100-year floods, or something
in
like that when they were
every
talking.
10
What?
years.
What was that?
We're having 100-year floods every 10 years.
Right, but they were saying we're ready for a 10-year flood or something, it's okay. But they weren't really dealing with what's
No.
the climate change that we're having, in their development
Right.
arguments.
And these places like Germany and China, and this year there were some really big floods around the world, and they're called 1,000-year floods,
Right,
not
right.
100
Right.
anymore.
That's what could be happening, right? 1,000-year
Yeah.
floods. Yeah.
So
Anything else?
that's, and then the last one we talked about was congestion and
Okay.
earthquakes, and sort of you're going to be hardening houses. We already do that for earthquakes, but we should also be doing hardening houses for wildfires. So you want to be able to build a house that it turns out that the houses that have like concrete siding and metal roofs, just they don't burn. The fire comes by, goes through, and
But I hate the
there was,
concrete because concrete then emits the CO2.
yeah, but
Like
what they do
greenhouse
is
gas. What?
they mix the concrete with something else, with like wood fiber and something,
Mm.
and they create these siding that's
You're thinking even in our
fireproof.
urban core that we need to be preparing more, even as we build, like my husband, like as we build, like my husband and I are thinking of an ADU, you're saying we need to be more thinking about fire resiliency, even in our
Yeah,
urban core builds.
not
But what?
necessarily in the urban core, not in the urban core, but on the periphery. If
Yeah,
you're on in the adjacent to a wildlife zone, a wildfire zone,
if you are, right,
if you are, the with climate change, that zone is going to expand, and so
right,
you need to
right.
be prepared for it. And there are tools today for how to design homes so that they don't burn.
Mhm.
And that's instead the legislature has put a lot of money into removing trees, but the wind has shown that, like for example, when Paradise burned, the embers essentially blew over the areas that had been manicured by CDF, the California Department of Fire. The wind carried the embers. They're called windbone embers now. That's
Right,
a term we learned about 5 years ago, and
right,
after the campfire that burned Paradise. And
right.
these windbone embers go over the fire breaks now.
Oh,
So it
right,
doesn't really make sense to be cutting the trees anymore. And when you look at pictures of Paradise, you see the trees still there. The houses burned, and the
right,
people that were there said that they could hear the fires coming because as the propane tanks blew up.
right.
So I'm not sure why the trees themselves did not burn and why the area has reforested. But the reason the houses burn is because the materials in there are extremely flammable. And,
Mm,
and the dry fencing and the dry siding and
right,
the gutters that had the dried material in them, all that allows for, even stucco, where it has cracks, will let the flame come through.
mm,
So the just all the houses need to be hardened.
right.
So
Good.
just to sort of close, resilience is the key that needs to be in our general and specific plans, and then we
Even
need to
our
be thinking
charter,
about, yeah, and then we need to be thinking about microgrids and efficiency with especially light pollution.
especially what, I'm sorry, what was that? Especially what?
Light pollution.
Light pollution, right?
You
Okay.
want to be thinking about how you're going to make everything
Right. In
efficient.
terms of our ecological collapse, we have to be including that into the issues as well with
Yeah,
our light pollution, with insects and that
right,
problem.
right.
Right.
Is that good? Thanks.
Oh, you're amazing. That was so inspiring to hear all the things and to hopefully get that. And then, the only other issue was, the repopulating us into the urban. Oh, that's my husband. Oh, that's our alarms. Oh, shoot. Anyway, it'll go off. But anyway, uh our security alarm. He didn't
Yeah.
turn it off. But anyway, so basically, let's see, I guess that was it. I mean, I really
Yeah. You
appreciate
wanted,
your time. It's been so great talking to you. Hopefully that will stop. Anyway, all right, good. It was so nice meeting you, and thank you for your work with the with that lawsuit against our city. Do you think, how does that look?
I think it looks
We can
good.
stop it?
Yeah, I think it can be stopped.
And do we need like a public outcry to support it? And is that
Yeah.
what you need when you file a lawsuit? Does the public input help, public rallying to
Yeah, it
support it?
helps.
It would
It helps.
help?
For example, in Half Moon Bay, when a developer was not given a permit to destroy some wetlands, he turned around and sued, and the city council, which was made up of real estate agents at the time, didn't fight the lawsuit. And so when the judgment was released against them, they did not appeal it, even though it could have been fought. And so then they took a $25 million judgment against the city, and then the city went broke. I think they did like a Chapter 11 reorganization, and it's all because the real estate agents wanted to be the city not to have control over the land decisions that were being made by the council. So yeah, it does help when citizens speak up, because you don't know what the city council will be doing with these big money interests behind them.
Right, but are you saying though that like the Boston, if we sue, the city for allowing the Boston developer to do that, but Boston might resue the city, right? Because they'll say, right? Is that what you're saying could happen?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that you don't know what the council will be doing when they have so much money behind them in Boston properties.
Right,
That decision to build in the creek corridor was unanimous on the council. Even the
right.
environmental council people voted for it. And
There
so you don't
wasn't
know
any
what
environmental, there wasn't any, there aren't any. I mean, that's
well,
why,
there are people there that do make environmental decisions every now and then, like Sergio Jimenez and Raul
but
Perales,
we didn't, but they didn't do it. They didn't
they
do
didn't
it.
step up. Yeah,
Right.
and you look at big money in decisions like this, and you wonder, right? You don't know what the impact is. Where whose bread is being buttered where.
Well, obviously, yeah. And so if the city, if you're suing the city, and then the city would, could possibly be resued if they agreed to deny the development. Well, you're suing them, and they say, okay, you're
Yeah.
right, and we'll deny them. Then
I
Boston will resue back, right?
I don't think Boston will resue. So cities like San Jose are really big. There's not you people are going to think twice about suing somebody as big as San Jose. San
Okay.
Jose, San Francisco, Oakland, these kinds of cities don't get sued.
So we'd really have to have a sea change for the council to say, well, you're suing them. And so basically they're just going to roll over, basically, is what you're thinking, hoping is what's going to happen. They're going to say, okay, we can't do this. And they'll just,
No, these cities are so big that they tend to do their own thing. And so all that we can do is stop this one project.
okay,
But
but
they
you
might,
think it will, by
yeah,
suing them, do you think it will stop? You think that will be it? It
yeah,
will be over.
yeah,
It will,
they will get a judgment saying that they have to honor the 30-foot
and so you
setbacks.
think we'll win, we will win, and
We will
they
win.
will just
Yeah,
say, it's you're doing the right thing, that you're helping us is
right.
amazing. So I guess we have to go because we have all the alarms going up. We love you. We appreciate you. Thank you. So
Okay.
actually, just to review, is by suing them, it's over. Basically, it's over.
I
They will
think
have,
so. Yeah.
it'll be
Yeah. I think
over.
that, yeah.
And we'll set a precedent that will change the way we're developing, and then, you know, obviously you're even thinking that this is the way we need to go to solve what is the problem that we solve when we expand our riparian corridor? Is that,
Is
well, besides ecological support,
flood. You allow,
flooding,
you make it
right,
safer
right.
for
We
the
actually
community.
prevent the flooding that we experience. Okay, we got to go. The alarms are up.
Okay,
Okay, we love you. We appreciate you. Thank you so
bye.
much, Gladwyn. You have a wonderful day.
You too.
Cat, cat, cat.